Pfizer blowing past third quarter earnings expectations, raising its full year guidance this morning. Revenue increasing 31% from a year ago, boosted by sales of its antiviral pill Paxlovid. Joining us now, we want to bring in Chris Shibutani. He is a Goldman Sachs senior biotech analyst in global investment research. Chris, it's great to have you here. So let's talk about, we want to get to a lot with you, but first let's focus on Pfizer. The news out this morning, we're seeing some excitement play out, once again raising its guidance for the year. What's your first take at the results?
Yes, good morning, Sana. Pfizer's strong print, but clearly it was driven very much so by the COVID-19 complex, in particular, as you mentioned, Paxlovid, the therapeutic. That was a very important part of the upside relative to the expectations, both in revenues and earnings, and also the raised guidance. The balance of the business is doing well, but is still very much a work in progress.
And so with that in mind, I mean, it seems like Pfizer saying something differently than some of the other competitors out there that are saying, okay, COVID is not the same kind of long tail that we may have expected to be. But for Pfizer, it seemed like that was a little bit different. And so if that is the case, how long can that continue to show up in their financial results?
Yeah, no, that's the key question, right? And I think what is the level at which things will begin to stabilize? It's been very clearly difficult to predict going back several years. Obviously, even the whole trajectory of the pandemic, the vaccine, very important role, and Paxlovid as well, a very effective therapeutic, but gauging the demand and the revenue cycles has been very challenging. Clearly, they did stronger than they had previously expected, raising that guidance. But I think investors are going to be trying to, again, focus on the base business, noting that we're probably going to get to some level of core COVID complex vaccine and therapeutic revenues. And hopefully we'll be able to better define that in the 2025-26 time period. Clearly, these results indicate that there's still a bit of volatility and it remains difficult to predict.
Yeah, and Chris, given that, of course, the battle with Starboard has been front and center when it comes to Pfizer. They've been very critical of a number of things, one of those being the spending spree, as they called it, under CEO Albert Bourla. They talked about the fact that he's done $70 billion worth of deals. I'm curious from your perspective, the spend of that magnitude, do you see that? Is that problematic, do you think, for Pfizer?
So two items there, right? I think the COVID complex revenue trajectory gave them tremendous access to resources. And with that, they were able to apply that to thinking about how to rebuild the post-COVID revenue profile for the company. Now, they did focus a tremendous amount on M&A, and they did quite a few acquisitions. Seagen was a very important cornerstone of that. There were some additional deals, however, which have included some subsequent results from pipeline and commercial products that have not quite worked out as originally envisioned. That return on investment component is what is, I think, being questioned. In terms of the overall operating expense profile, the company has been very actively engaged in a clearly announced cost realignment program. And we're seeing those results over the last several quarters now, where the operating expense levels, spending on SI&A and R&D has come in below expectations. So it's a combination of factors here, but that, again, investment in the opportunity, the capital allocation on the forward had been considerable on the M&A front, and we're seeing more cross currents and mixed results in terms of what those acquisitions are doing to contribute to the forward outlook. I think that's where the nexus of the debate is.
Yeah, and Chris, one of the other things that Starboard Jeff Smith has said that stuck out to me was questioning Bourla's role at the top. And he said, quote unquote, it could make sense for Pfizer to replace Bourla as CEO. Pfizer without Bourla, what does that look like?
So any pharmaceutical company naturally has the titular head of the CEO, but Pfizer has in front of it the opportunity to make very important announcement, and that is of the head of R&D. At the end of the day, biopharma, the industry is driven by innovation. The point person there who can play a very important role in being a voice and strategist of defining the pipeline and the growth outlook, I think is going to be essential. They mentioned in their press release this morning that they are quite advanced in terms of their search for that. So I think that becomes really a focus of attention for investors. The voice that defines where the strategy is going to be on the innovation front, which will then be a very important guide to how Pfizer can progress over the coming several years.
To what extent does that R&D and that investment need to have within it a prioritization around GLP-1s and weight loss drugs?
That's clearly the focus of attention of investors. Across the pharmaceutical industry, the GLP-1s and obesity have been a very transformational kind of perhaps more than once in a generation kind of opportunity. Pfizer has been consistent in their declaration of being interested in being involved in that realm. Again, has had more mixed results here. What was interesting about today's update, they do have a lead asset, danuglipron. We're waiting for once daily dosing information. However, they finally did disclose some additional pipeline candidates. That's sure to be a topic of conversation during the earnings call coming up. I think investors have been reserved in terms of their level of expectations of Pfizer's ability to compete commercially these pipeline assets and the clinical data, not just from them, but obviously from other players who have entered into the space, are going to be very closely watched.
I was waiting for somebody to pronounce danuglipron for me here. Chris, thanks so much. Appreciate the time here this morning. Chris Shibutani of Goldman Sachs. Thanks so much.
Thank you.